Hi, everyone. It's me, Morganne Gervais, your career counselor. I want to share some history with you. I'm hoping that sharing my experiences with starting businesses, closing businesses, failing a couple of times, whatever you want to call it, I'm hoping that sharing my stories will encourage you and motivate you to get started on whatever it is that you've been putting on the back burner for however long you've been putting it on the back burner. Forgive me for laughing a little bit, but I know how it is when you want to start your own business. You have a tendency to get caught up in your head with all the what ifs and but what about that? What about this? I don't have this. I don't have that. Don't I need lots of money? Yada, 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 yada. To the point where you never get started. You just never do anything. And you feel stuck in a rut. You feel stuck in a dead end job. You feel stuck in a place like I did where you maxed out. My career, my background is in human resources training and recruiting. I had great jobs. I worked in corporate America for a long time. I worked for some colleges. I worked for a nonprofit organization for about 6.5 years, and I learned a lot there. I learned a lot about myself as well and how to interact with certain people, mostly senior executives. I had some challenges with some of the executives there, but that was a long time ago. Anyways, so this video is about my history, my experiences, my first businesses, what they were, and how I got them started, and how much money I did or didn't have. And then I might touch a little bit on like what I would do different now as opposed to then. So, right off the top of my head, I think one of the things that I would do different is I would probably use social media, of course, because, well, it exists. And I'm kind of up there in age. So, some of these things we didn't have, like Instagram didn't exist when I started my first business, my second business. I don't even think it existed when I started my third business. What else didn't exist? The internet was around. I can say that at least. I'm not that old. I mean, there was the internet, but so my first business, I'll just go ahead and jump in. My first business was as a wedding photographer, and this is when I was in my late 20s, I believe. I I started this wedding photography business right after, was it right after? It might have been right on the cusp of the crash of the dot-com era, which was almost 20 years ago, right? So I had only one camera at the time. I had a 35 millimeter camera, and this is before we had phones that pretty much did everything for you, but I would never shoot a wedding with my phone. So I had a 35 millimeter camera that took film, not digital. It was film. And I prefer film, actually. I like it, so I miss it. But I had that and I sold it. I sold it probably about 6 to 8 months after I decided that I was going to start a wedding photography business. And I sold it for special missions to donate to a church that I was attending at the time. Now I've left that church, but not because of the special missions. But anyways, I started the business when I was unemployed. Um, Essentially had no camera because I didn't have the camera for very long, and I didn't have any money saved. I didn't have any money in my account. So what I ended up doing was renting equipment. I used my credit card to rent a medium format camera, which was, I want to say the film size was 120. And the expense for that film was pretty high, especially for someone who wasn't working. So I started that business unemployed, no equipment of my own, and no cash. And I was successful. I made anywhere from $1,200 to $1,500 per wedding, $1,200 to $1,500 per wedding. Mind you, though, the weddings were an all-day event. So that meant I started in the morning while the brides were getting ready, getting their hair done, having their makeup done, and getting dressed. Of course, brides want all of that, photographed so that they can put that in their memory book as well in their photo albums. So I did that, and then I shot the wedding, and then I did the posed photographs, and then I went straight into photographing the reception and the cake cutting and the first dance, and then gathered family and friends with the bridal party. So it was an all day event, to say, the least 15 hours. Some of those weddings were, some people like to party. And so it went all day. And so I basically I felt great about shooting the wedding. I always felt great about being at the wedding. I got to eat sometimes and I got to sit down when I was tired, like towards the end. But for the most part, I was on my feet the entire time. The next day, I felt like I had been hit by a Mack truck. I was just out. My whole body was in pain from all of the, standing and bending and twisting and turning and carrying all of this equipment and switching film out and trying to do everything so quickly. So I was exhausted. Even at, the age of 26, 27, 28, I was exhausted. But you have to excuse my dog. But I loved it. I absolutely loved shooting weddings. So I want to tell you about a couple of mistakes I made with that business. One of the mistakes that I made and learned from was that I didn't charge everyone the same amount, for one, and sometimes they knew each other because they were referring me, which wasn't cool. So I would say, create a standard if you're going to do something like this and stick with it. But people go, oh, that's so much. Oh, I want a discount. And I'm a people pleaser and I have a hard time saying no. So sometimes I'd be like, okay, you can pay me $300 less, which was a huge mistake. Huge mistake. Another mistake I made was that I wasn't creating packages for my clients and I wasn't creating albums. I wasn't putting all of the photographs from the entire event together in order and handing over this wonderful gift to the bride, which is a no-no, apparently. My mistake was that I thought that the bride would want to do that herself. I thought that she would want it arranged a certain way. She wanted it to look the way she wanted it to look. So I didn't provide that service. And I didn't think that there was anything wrong with that. But brides were coming back to me saying, for $1,200 or $1,500, you didn't even give me an album. And I felt really awful about that. And so I did try to change that up towards the end, but eventually I ended up stopping the wedding photography business and moved on to something else. But as a result of not putting complete packages together and providing a completed album in the end, I believe it hurt my business in that those brides that I did work with weren't referring me to new clients, potential clients, other brides that they knew. When someone gets married, oftentimes their friends are getting married soon too. I don't know why, but people in their late 20s, early 30s, they're all getting married or attending other weddings, and wedding season is really huge. Prom season is really huge. And just, I don't know, it could have been a snowball effect for my business, but it wasn't, because I wasn't putting the extra effort in to generate more business. And that was my fault. So that was a lesson learned. What I would do different now with this business, of course, as I mentioned in the beginning, is I would use social media. I would create a website, I would go digital. As much as I like film, I would go digital, and I would promote the heck out of that business. I did no promoting whatsoever, and I relied 100% on word of mouth and referrals, which I mentioned a little bit ago. I didn't get too many, but I did get enough business to keep me afloat until I got a regular job again. I think another thing that I would probably do is work faster. I know that I ran into a problem at one wedding where, and I don't take responsibility for this, I think it was the responsibility of the wedding coordinators. There was an overlap. The wedding that I was photographing butted up against another wedding that I had nothing to do with and no knowledge of even. The wedding coordinator that we were working with, who worked at the facility where the wedding was being held, said, don't worry about anything. Just, take your time, do whatever you need to do. The space is yours. And so I did. And I took advantage of that. And I guess I wasn't really uh, working in a timely fashion. And we were just kind of, okay, let's get this group of people over here and photograph them. Okay, let's do this over here. Okay, these flowers will look nice on the side or in the background. And unbeknownst to me, there was another wedding party behind me waiting for the space. They were waiting for their wedding to start, not the bride and the groom, but the wedding guest and the wedding party, besides the groom and the bride, were behind me, and they were waiting for that space, the same gazebo, the same garden space, and I didn't know. And I just kept photographing and photographing and photographing the wedding party and guest that I had been hired to photograph. So I felt really bad about that. One of the guests actually came up and tapped me on the shoulder and said something along the lines of, we have this space at 4 o'clock, something like that. And I said, okay. I didn't wear a watch. I didn't know what time it was. She didn't tell me that it was like 3:58. I was like, okay. And I kept photographing. Anyways, it caused a huge commotion. I'm non-confrontational. I don't like to argue with people. I typically don't yell, scream, and holler, or, and I just think it's very unprofessional. If you're working for someone, you don't want to have an altercation with other people while you've been hired to do, provide a service. So I would work faster, definitely work faster. One of the other things I would do is I would maintain control of the situation. Sometimes families have a tendency to get too involved, and they can actually take over. They can actually dictate what you do. And so I think for me, being nice and not wanting to cause waves, of course you have to serve the people, but you don't have to respond to every request, because the requests come from all over. They come from the bride and groom. They come from the parents of the bride and groom. They come from aunts and uncles who haven't seen, the nieces and the nephews forever and a day. And then they want to get all the children involved. And so very quickly, if you aren't confident and take command or maintain control of the situation, someone else or several other people will take over and start demanding that you take a photo like this, take a photo like that, take a photo over here, and you lose absolute control of everything, and it's just not a good thing. So I would definitely work harder to maintain control of a wedding situation. I think the last thing that I would do different is I wouldn't give away the negatives. I'm not really sure how I feel about that, because there's a part of me that feels like if you pay for them, you should have them, right? But then there's another part of me that feels like I own them, even though it's not my wedding. I own them, and I should maintain ownership of them for a couple of different reasons. But one is that if something happens to the album or the photos that you've been, provided, and then you also have the negatives, how are you going to get reprints or copies made? You can't, because generally what happens is if the negatives are given to the client, the photos and the negatives are kept in the same area, same vicinity, or same envelope or binder or album, and it's a tragedy. It really is. If something happens to the photos, there's no way that you can get those. I mean, a wedding is a one-time deal. It's, you have one opportunity to get these photographs. It's not like you can just do it all over again, right? So I think that I would probably maintain the negatives. Yeah, I think that's probably best. I would probably maintain the negatives, keep them in an archive. And that way, if someone came back to me and said, hey, we lost our photos, or they were damaged in a house fire, or water damage or whatever, we were wondering if we could get copies or reprints done of those. And I think that I would like to be able to reserve the right to provide those to them at a cost or no cost, depending. I don't know. I haven't figured that all out. But I would do a few things different these days. 20 years later, I would do a few things different. My second business was a model management company. And the name of the company was Seventh Avenue. And this one is pretty special to me because I worked with a really good friend of mine who passed away recently, designing the logo and putting all of the visuals together. And I still have them to this day. They were absolutely amazing. And one of the things that he did that I really liked was he hand scripted, hand designed the lettering, and the logo or the lettering was incorporated with a red dot. So for me, it kind of had a Japanese feel to it, which is interesting because neither one of us is Japanese, but it it was just beautiful. It was very simple, very elegant. It was almost delicate in a way. And I just really loved how the business cards came out, the logo itself. He created stickers for me, letterhead. He did an amazing job, and I still have all of those pieces. I love the design that he came up with for that company. But the model management company was interesting, and this would be good for you to know if you want to do something like this. It really didn't require any overhead or equipment. It just didn't. I mean, if you think about it, what I did was recruit models for print work. Now, I don't want you to think runway models or Victoria's Secret models. What I did was my experience was working for a company that hired models. So what I did was I recruited models for catalog and print work and then booked them for a fee and gave a portion of the earnings to the models. So that's how I operated that business. It was strictly for print work, and it's much easier to do than you might think. It really is. I was in Northern California. There are lots of agencies in San Francisco in the Bay Area. So if you wanted to get your foot wet or, learn firsthand by first starting working for an agency, I would probably check out some of the major cities. I'm in Los Angeles now, and so there are several agencies here as well. But my experience was working with a direct marketing company that needed models for print catalog work. So that's what I did. That's how I learned about the business. My startup cost was incredibly low. I had a dedicated phone line. I did not have a cell phone for this business. I actually had a business office in my cottage apartment, and it was a dedicated phone line. I had a website, got the business license, business cards, like I mentioned before, and letterhead. That was it. And then what I did with that company, or how I learned to really get going with that company, was that I attended SCORE meetings. And you can look this up online and find one in your area. I won't really talk too much about SCORE, but the great thing about a model management company is that the models, many of them find you, and they send their headshots in unsolicited. Once you put yourself out there with like a website and everything, you're searchable, and the models are looking for work, so they will just send you their information, send you their photos, send you their resume, send you their experience, the things that they've done, and you very easily, very quickly will have a nice selection of print models to choose from and book, just like that. You do want to make sure that all of your contracts and agreements are in order and reviewed by legal counsel. And because I didn't have the budget for a lawyer, I used SCORE. There are some individuals at SCORE who either have a business background or a legal background or both, and they will help you for free get your business in order. So that's what I did. So that was my second business, and I loved it. It was fun. But I ended up stopping that one too. That was right around the same time, the crash of the dot-com era. And I think for me, I needed to generate more income. I had a car payment, rent, I had bills. I needed to generate more income and faster. And I believe it was shortly after that time that I ended up moving to Southern California. So, what is preventing you from going into business for yourself? Is it that you have the mentality, like many of us have, you have the mentality that a job provides stability and you can't start your own business? Or is it a fear of failure? There's probably a lot of reasons that you feel like you can't really start your business, but I've just shared two examples where there's not a whole lot required to get started. And all I did was use natural talents or talents that I had already acquired, built up, and some experiences that I had had, some knowledge that I had, and I put it into practice. You know that you're meant for more. So why not start your business now? Get it going now. So in a year or two, probably two, but in a year or two, you can leave your job. You can leave your job and have the independence and the financial freedom that you've always wanted. It does take about 2 years. I'm not going to lie. It could even take 3. It depends on you, your motivation, and how willing you are to really put yourself out there. But nowadays with social media, it's so much easier than it used to be. And I think it's even less expensive because you can actually build up a following without spending a lot of money. You don't have to run an ad in the newspaper, which always costs money, right? You can just put videos out there like I'm doing. You can post on Instagram, post on Facebook. You can ask your friends to share. You can attend events. Of course, that's not social media, but events will also post to social media, so you get exposure that way as well, especially if you're a presenter like I am. I speak at conferences and I do trainings for corporations. So if those are videotaped and uploaded to that company's website or their social media pages, then I get additional exposure at no cost to me. Does that make sense? And I got paid to speak. So the best businesses to start with quick growth and little startup cost, little to no startup cost, are service-based businesses. One of the businesses that I had started that didn't require anything other than my laptop and my brain was a resume writing business. And this was after I had some years in human resources. I found that I really wanted to help people more than be on the human resources side where I was helping the company more than anything. I really didn't like having to discipline and terminate employees. I really wanted to help them. And so I started doing it on the side. I was really good at it. People were coming to me, all the time, people that knew me, people that knew other people that knew me. And so I ended up building a career from it. I don't want you to think Instacart. I don't want you to think Uber. I don't want you to think Lyft or Wag or Rover or any of these other, you know, contract kind of based companies that you can work for. You do end up being an independent contractor with them. And I know that they market it as being in business for yourself, but you're really not. Most of the money that is earned from the rides, the ride sharing, or the dog walking, or grocery shopping, whatever it is, the company gets. So you're not really in business for yourself. You're making money for that company. So what I want everyone to do is to not think along those lines. I mean, those companies are fine if you need to make a little extra money. If you want to do that while you're still working your 9 to 5 so that you can save up 3 to 6 months worth of income and be able to leave and start your own business, then I think those companies are fine for something like that, but they're not good for you to do long term. You're not going to make any more money than you're making now with the company if you work for one of these. In 6 months, you're going to be making the same amount of money you did when you started with a company like that. So you need to think a scalable service-based business that's going to put money in your account now and make it possible for you to leave your 9 to 5. That's what you want to do. You want to think along those lines. With the right idea and consistency, you can certainly do this. It's totally doable. It also must be something you can do alone. No one's going to want to do it with you. And even if they do, you have to be very selective about who you decide to work with. Sometimes people want to jump on board because it sounds like a great idea, but they really don't have what it takes to, just take it all the way you might be able to or you might want to. So personally for me, and I speak from experience, I've tried to start businesses with friends. I've tried to start businesses with family. it never works. They just don't have the drive that I have. They don't have the commitment that I have. There's just too much time wasted. And should we do this? Should we do that? Blah, 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 blah. So for me, I work better alone. I do miss some aspects of working in corporate America or working with someone else. And I think it's just the social aspect, the face-to-face interaction. But if I attend a networking event, and like I did last night, I went to an event that was just absolutely amazing, I can still get that need met. Does that make sense? So you have to come up with an idea for a scalable business that is something that you can do alone. Your friends and family are probably as stuck in a rut as you are. So you're going to have to fly solo, at least at first. You can bring people on board later if you really want to help people out. And I'm a helping kind of person. I always want, I always want to help other people who are in the same situation that I'm in. It's like, hey, let's do this. But I have to remember, I have to remind myself, I have to realize that, like I said, not everyone's going to have the same level of commitment to entrepreneurship, self-employment, business building that I have. So I just have to go it alone. So what you want to do in getting started is use what you already have. Use what you already know. Make no excuses, turn off the TV and get to work. You can even do something extreme like I did, and that is to totally cut off cable 100%. So there's no way you can watch TV even if you wanted to, unless you go over to somebody else's house. But you're not going to be hanging out at other people's houses all the time, right? So for me, I was more productive not having the television and not having that distraction around me. I got a lot more done just having the internet. Just having the internet. And you're not missing out on anything. You can watch Netflix for the occasional movie. You can binge watch, your favorite shows once in a while. There's really not a whole lot on TV anyway, so I don't know why you would do it. I don't know why you would rather sit on the couch watching TV when you could be building a business that generates an incredible amount of income and wealth for you and your family and potentially leave a legacy. You could be setting up your family for life. You could be setting up your children for life. You really just have to get going, get started. So use what you already have, use what you already know, and make no excuses. Turn off the TV. What I think is a good way to get started is to write down 3 to 5 ideas right now. Write down 3 to 5 ideas, business ideas, of course, that you could start today, that don't require any equipment or startup capital or anything like that. Write down 3 to 5. 3 to 5. You've got to be able to come up with at least 3, if not 5. And start there. 3. And then pick one of the 3 to work on within the next week. Set some goals, set some intentions, write out some action items, and get to work on that one service-based business that you already know, already have the skills for, already have the knowledge for, that doesn't require any capital to get it started, doesn't require any equipment. You have to start one, just like that, so you won't get overwhelmed and you won't make excuses like, I don't have money, where is it going to come from? Don't make excuse that you don't have time either, because you have time. You're probably just wasting 2 to 3 hours a night on the couch watching TV. That's time. That's time that you could be using to build your business. So I appreciate you watching. Thank you. I hope this video was helpful, and I do hope that you come back for more. I appreciate you guys. I am grateful for this opportunity to share my experiences with you, and I do hope that you got something out of it. Be blessed and have a great weekend.